The accusation came like a lightning strike on a clear summer day in 1883, shattering everything Willa Kinsley had worked 3 years to build in Snowflake, Arizona. She stood in the modest office of the Silver Creek Trading Post, her hands trembling as her employer, Mr. Harrington, slammed his ledger book on the desk with such force that dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. His face had turned the color of a ripe tomato, purple veins standing out on his forehead as he pointed one gnarled finger at her chest. $200 gone from the safe, and you are the only one besides me with the combination, he said, his voice shaking with rage. I trusted you, Miss Kinsley. I gave you a position when no other establishment in this territory would hire a woman to handle money, and this is how you repay my generosity. Willa felt the blood drain from her face, her knees going weak beneath her simple cotton dress. The room seemed to tilt sideways as she gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself. Mr. Harrington, I swear on my mother's grave I did not take that money. I have never stolen anything in my entire life. Please, you must believe me. But the old man's expression remained hard as Arizona granite, unmoved by her desperate plea. The evidence speaks for itself. The safe was locked when I arrived this morning, and nothing was forced. Only you and I know that combination. My son checked the books last night and noted the exact amount. This morning it is gone. The door to the office burst open, and Willa's heart sank further as she recognized Marshall Webb, a heavy-set man with a mustache that drooped past his chin and eyes that always seemed to look at her with barely concealed disapproval. Behind him stood several townspeople who had gathered at the commotion, their faces a mixture of curiosity and judgment. Among them was Mrs. Patterson, the banker's wife, who had never hidden her disdain for a woman working in what she considered a man's position. Her thin lips curved into something that might have been satisfaction. That her? Marshall Webb asked, already pulling iron shackles from his belt. Yes, Marshall. I am pressing charges against Miss Kinsley for theft, Mr. Harrington said, though Willa thought she detected the faintest waver in his voice, as if some small part of him still doubted the accusation he was making. No, please, Willa said, backing away until her shoulders hit the wooden wall. I did not do this. Someone else must have opened the safe. Perhaps someone discovered the combination somehow. Or maybe the count was wrong yesterday. Please, just give me time to prove my innocence. The marshal moved toward her with the efficiency of a man who had performed this duty many times before. The cold iron closed around her wrists with a click that sounded like a death knell. Willa had never felt so helpless, so utterly alone. She had no family in Snowflake, having come to the small Arizona town 3 years ago after her parents died of influenza back in Missouri. She had built a life here through hard work and determination, earning respect through her meticulous attention to detail and honest dealings. Now it was all crumbling around her like a sand castle in a dust storm. As Marshall Webb led her out onto the wooden boardwalk, the crowd that had gathered grew larger. Willa kept her head high despite the shame burning through her chest, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break down. The August heat hit her like a physical blow after the relative coolness of the trading post's interior. Snowflake sat in the high country of northeastern Arizona, but summer still brought temperatures that could bake a person if they were not careful. Make way, the marshal called out, pulling Willa through the throng of gawkers. She recognized most of them the blacksmith's apprentice, several ranch hands from the surrounding spreads, women she had served in the trading post with nothing but courtesy and efficiency. Now they looked at her as if she were something diseased. I always knew she was too clever by half, Mrs. Patterson said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. A woman has no business handling money. It is too much temptation for their weak natures. Willa wanted to respond, to defend herself, but the words caught in her throat. What good would it do? They had already judged her guilty. The jail sat at the far end of Main Street, a squat adobe building that seemed to radiate heat in the afternoon sun. Marshall Webb opened the heavy door and pulled Willa into the dim interior. The sudden change from bright sunlight to shadow left her momentarily blind. When her eyes adjusted, She saw the two cells that comprised the entire jail facility. One stood empty, its door hanging open. The marshal guided her toward it. "Wait," a voice said from the corner of the room, and Willa turned to see a figure unfold itself from a chair she had not noticed. The man stepped into a shaft of light coming through the high window, and Willa found herself looking at someone she had seen around town but never formally met. He was tall, perhaps in his mid-20s, with sandy brown hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of whiskey held up to lamplight. He wore dusty range clothes and a gun belt slung low on his hips, marking him as one of the many cowboys who worked the cattle ranches surrounding Snowflake. "This does not concern you, Shane," Marshal Webb said with a note of irritation. "I am just booking a prisoner." The cowboy Shane apparently moved closer, his boots making soft sounds on the packed earth floor. His gaze traveled over Willa's face with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she held his stare, refusing to show weakness. Something in his expression was not judgment or condemnation. It looked almost like curiosity, mixed with something she could not quite identify. "What is she accused of?" Shane asked, directing his question to the marshal, but never taking his eyes off Willa. "Theft from the Silver Creek trading post. $200 from the safe. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a job to do." The marshal moved to push Willa into the cell, but Shane stepped between them with a fluid grace that spoke of a man comfortable with his body and confident in his abilities. "You are making a mistake," Shane said, his voice calm but carrying an undertone of steel. "I know you are not a thief." Willa stared at him in shock, her mouth falling open. "You do not even know me. How could you possibly cure—" "I have been watching you for 6 months," Shane said, and then seemed to realize how that sounded. A faint color rose in his tanned cheeks. "Not in an improper way. I come into town every week to pick up supplies for the Anchor Ranch, and I always make sure to come to the trading post when you are working. You are the most honest person I have ever seen. You caught an error in my favor once. $5 you could have pocketed, and you tracked me down to give it back. A thief would not do that." "That is a touching character reference," Marshal Webb said dryly. "But it does not change the facts. The money is gone and she had access to the safe. Now move aside, Shane Adler, before I charge you with interfering with the law." Shane did not move immediately. He continued to look at Willa, and she felt something pass between them in that moment, some wordless communication that made her breath catch in her throat. Then he stepped back, lifting his hands in a gesture of surrender. "This is not over," he said quietly. The marshal pushed Willa into the cell and slammed the door shut with a clang that echoed in the small space. She gripped the bars, watching as Shane Adler picked up his hat from the chair where he had apparently been waiting for something entirely unrelated to her situation. "I will figure out who really took that money," Shane said, settling his hat on his head. "I give you my word." "Why?" Willa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you help me?" Shane paused at the door, turning to look back at her. The light from outside silhouetted his tall frame. "Because somebody needs to, and because I meant what I said. I know you are not a thief. Sometimes you just know things about people, and I know this about you." Then he was gone, leaving Willa alone with the marshal, who was already settling back into his chair with a newspaper, apparently done with her for the moment. She sank onto the narrow cot that served as the cell's only furniture, her mind reeling from everything that had happened in the last hour. This morning she had awakened in her small rented room above the seamstress shop, ready for another day of work. Now she sat in a jail cell, accused of a crime she did not commit, with her reputation in ruins and her future looking bleaker than a desert at midnight. But there was one small ember of hope burning in her chest. A cowboy named Shane Adler believed in her innocence. A man she had never spoken to beyond basic transaction pleasantries apparently thought enough of her character to defend her to the marshal. It should not matter so much, but somehow it did. In this moment, when the entire town had turned against her, one person stood in her corner. Willa wrapped her arms around herself, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. She would not cry, not where the marshal might see. Instead, she focused on remembering every detail of the past few days at the trading post, trying to think of any clue that might point to the real thief. The safe sat in Mr. Harrington's office, a large metal box that required both a key and a combination to open. Mr. Harrington kept the key on a chain around his neck, never removing it even to sleep as far as she knew. She had memorized the combination when he first gave it to her 2 years ago, after proving herself trustworthy enough to open the shop in his absence. Who else could have learned that combination? She had always been careful to shield the dial when opening the safe, turning her body to block anyone's view. Mr. Harrington was similarly cautious, but combinations could be discovered through patient observation or trickery. Someone clever and determined might have found a way. Her thoughts turned to Mr. Harrington's son, Gerald, who had supposedly checked the books the previous night. Gerald was a few years younger than Willa, perhaps 21 or 22, and he had never shown any aptitude for business. He spent most of his time gambling at the saloon and courting various young women around town with his father's money. More than once, Willa had seen Mr. Harrington slip his son cash with a disapproving look. Could Gerald be in debt? Could he have taken the money himself and blamed her to cover his tracks? The more Willa thought about it, the more sense it made. Gerald had the opportunity. He was in the office last night, supposedly checking the books. He could have watched his father open the safe dozens of times over the years and memorized the combination. And he certainly had motive if he owed money to the wrong people. But how could she prove it from inside a jail cell? The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. Marshal Webb ignored her completely, reading his newspaper and occasionally spitting tobacco juice into a brass spittoon beside his desk. Willa tried to rest, but sleep proved impossible. Her mind would not stop racing through possibilities and scenarios, searching for some way to prove her innocence. As the shadows lengthened and the heat of the day began to fade, the door opened again. This time it was a young boy, perhaps 12 years old, carrying a covered basket. He glanced nervously at the marshal, who waved him toward the cell. "Supper for the prisoner," the boy said, his voice cracking slightly. "From Mrs. Chen at the boarding house." He passed the basket through a slot in the bars designed for that purpose. Willa accepted it with a grateful nod, though she had no appetite. When she lifted the cloth covering, she found not only a simple meal of beans and cornbread, but also a folded piece of paper tucked beside the tin plate. She glanced at the marshal, but he had returned to his newspaper, paying no attention to her. With her back turned to hide her actions, Willa unfolded the paper. The handwriting was bold and masculine, written with obvious haste. "Working on clearing your name. Stay strong. Shane Adler." Despite everything, Willa felt a small smile tug at her lips. He was actually doing it, actually trying to help her. She refolded the paper and tucked it into her bodice, then forced herself to eat a few bites of the meal. She would need her strength for whatever came next. Night fell over Snowflake, bringing with it the blessed relief of cooler temperatures. Through the high window of her cell, Willa could see stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. The marshal lit a kerosene lamp, filling the jail with flickering yellow light and the smell of burning oil. Willa lay on her cot, staring at the ceiling and wondering where Shane Adler was and what he might be doing. She must have eventually drifted into an uneasy sleep because she jolted awake to the sound of voices outside the jail. The quality of light had changed. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky visible through her window in shades of pink and gold. The door opened and Willa sat up quickly, her heart pounding. Shane Adler strode in, his expression grim but determined. Behind him came Mr. Harrington, looking older than he had yesterday, his shoulders slumped. And behind them both, held firmly by another deputy, Willa recognized as Tom Santos, came Gerald Harrington. The young man's face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, and his fine clothes were rumpled and stained. "Tell them," Shane said, his voice hard as iron. "Tell them what you told me." Gerald's good eye darted around the room like a trapped animal searching for escape. His father stared at him with an expression of such profound disappointment that Willa felt almost sorry for the young man. Almost. I took the money, Gerald said finally, his voice barely audible. I took it from the safe. She had nothing to do with it. Relief flooded through Willa so powerfully that she gripped the bars to keep from falling. Why? She asked, the word coming out sharper than she intended. Why would you do that and let me take the blame? Gerald flinched but did not meet her eyes. I owe money to some men in Holbrook. Bad men. They were threatening to hurt me if I did not pay. I thought I could take the money, settle the debt, and pay it back before anyone noticed. But Father found out too quickly. When he accused you, he trailed off miserably. You just let an innocent woman go to jail to save your own worthless hide. Shane finished for him, his tone dripping with contempt. You are lucky I found you when I did, before those men in Holbrook decided to collect their debt another way. Marshall Webb was unlocking the cell door, and Willa stepped out on shaking legs. She had spent less than a day in jail, but it felt like a lifetime. Mr. Harrington approached her slowly, his weathered face creased with remorse. Miss Kinsley, I cannot begin to tell you how sorry I am, he said, his voice trembling. I should never have doubted you. You have been the most loyal, trustworthy employee I have ever had, and I let my shock and anger blind me to the truth. Can you ever forgive me? Willa looked at the old man, at the genuine anguish in his eyes, and felt her anger softening despite herself. You were protecting your business, Mr. Harrington. I understand that. But your son needs to face consequences for what he did. He was willing to let me hang for his crime. I will not hang, Gerald protested weakly, but Marshall Webb cut him off with a harsh laugh. Grand theft in the Arizona Territory? You are looking at 5 to 10 years in the Yuma Territorial Prison, son. That is if your father presses charges. The marshal looked at Mr. Harrington expectantly. The old man closed his eyes, pain etched in every line of his face. When he opened them again, they were wet with unshed tears. He is my son, he said simply. My only child. But what he did was unforgivable. I will press charges, but I will also work to see that he gets the minimum sentence, and he will pay back every cent, with interest, even if it takes him the rest of his life. Gerald made a choking sound, but the deputy held him firmly. As they led him away to the cell Willa had just vacated, she felt a strange mixture of justice and pity. The young man had made terrible choices, but she knew that prison in the Arizona Territory was a brutal experience that would change him forever, if he survived it at all. Shane touched her elbow gently, guiding her toward the door. Come on, let me get you out of here. Willa went with him gratefully, stepping out into the cool morning air. The sun had just cleared the eastern horizon, painting Snowflake's simple buildings in shades of amber and rose. The town was just beginning to wake up. She could smell wood smoke from breakfast fires and hear the distant sound of a rooster crowing. How did you know? She asked Shane as they walked slowly down the deserted main street. How did you figure out it was Gerald? Shane's expression was thoughtful. I did not know for certain at first, but I started asking questions, listening to talk around town. Gerald has been gambling heavy at the saloon for months, and he has been losing more than winning. A few people mentioned that he seemed nervous lately, looking over his shoulder like he expected trouble. So I rode to Holbrook last night and asked around. It did not take long to find the men he owed money to. They were happy to tell me all about it once I explained that their debtor had just been arrested and they would never see their money if they did not cooperate with the law. You rode all night? Willa asked, suddenly noticing the exhaustion evident in his face, the redness in his eyes. It was worth it, Shane said simply. I told you I would clear your name. They had reached the boarding house where Shane apparently had a room when he stayed in town. He paused at the bottom of the steps, leading up to the porch, turning to face her fully. In the growing light of dawn, Willa could see him clearly for the first time. He had a strong, honest face with a jaw that looked like it had been carved from stone. A small scar marked his left cheekbone, probably from some ranch accident or another. But it was his eyes that held her attention warm and steady, looking at her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Why did you do all this for me?" she asked again. "We do not even know each other." Shane was quiet for a long moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I told you I have been watching you for months. Maybe that sounds strange, but it is the truth. Every time I came to town, I found excuses to visit the trading post. At first, I told myself it was just because you were pretty, which you are. But the more I observed you, the more I saw. You are kind to everyone who comes in, even the people others look down on. You are fair and honest in every dealing. You work harder than anyone I have ever seen, man or woman. And you have this way of smiling, like you have got a secret that makes you happy no matter what else is happening. I guess I have been a little bit in love with you for a while now, and I could not stand by and watch you be punished for something you did not do." Willa felt heat rising in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the emerging sun. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. She had been courted once or twice back in Missouri, awkward encounters with boys who had more enthusiasm than sense. But this was different. Shane Adler was a man, not a boy, and his words carried a weight of sincerity that took her breath away. "You do not even know me," she protested weakly, but Shane shook his head. "I know enough. I know that you are the kind of woman worth fighting for. The question is, would you let me get to know you better? Properly, I mean. I would like to court you, Miss Kinsley, if you would allow it." Willa's heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. Everything was happening so fast. Yesterday she had been accused of a crime and thrown in jail. Today she was free, and a handsome cowboy was asking permission to court her. It felt like something from one of the dime novels she secretly read late at night. "I think I would like that," she said softly, and the smile that broke across Shane's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "Good," he said. "That is real good. But right now, you should go get some rest. You have been through an ordeal, and you look ready to fall over. Where are you staying?" "I rent a room above the seamstress shop," Willa said, gesturing down the street. "Mrs. Holloway lets me stay there in exchange for helping with her bookkeeping." "Let me walk you there," Shane offered, extending his arm. After a moment's hesitation, Willa took it, feeling the solid strength of his muscle beneath her fingers. They walked in comfortable silence, the town slowly coming to life around them. A few early risers were out, and Willa noticed the shocked looks they received. News of her arrest had surely spread through Snowflake like wildfire, and now here she was, free and walking arm in arm with Shane Adler. By noon, the entire town would be buzzing with speculation. When they reached the seamstress shop, Shane tipped his hat to her. "Rest up today. Tomorrow is Sunday. Would you do me the honor of accompanying me to church and then perhaps a picnic lunch afterward?" "I would like that very much," Willa said. She found herself reluctant to let go of his arm, to say goodbye even though exhaustion was pulling at her like a physical weight. Shane seemed to feel the same reluctance. He stood there for a long moment, just looking at her. Then, moving slowly enough that she could pull away if she wanted, he reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair that had escaped her bun behind her ear. His fingers were warm and slightly rough from years of ranch work, and the brief touch sent tingles down her spine. "Tomorrow, then," he said softly. "Sleep well, Willa Kinsley." He had used her first name, she realized as she climbed the stairs to her room. Somehow, during their conversation, they had moved past formalities. It felt right. Mrs. Holloway, a plump woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a perpetual smell of lavender about her, was waiting in the hallway. "Oh, my dear girl," she said, pulling Willa into a crushing embrace. "I heard what happened. I did not believe it for a moment, not a single moment. Are you all right?" "I am free," Willa said, her voice muffled against Mrs. Holloway's ample bosom. "They discovered the real thief. It was Mr. Harrington's son." Mrs. Holloway pulled back, her eyes widening. "Gerald?" Well, I cannot say I am entirely surprised. That boy has been heading for trouble for years. But to let you take the blame, that is lower than a snake's belly. Come, let me make you some tea and you can tell me everything. But Willa was swaying on her feet, the accumulated stress and sleepless night finally catching up with her all at once. Mrs. Holloway noticed immediately and guided her to her small room, helping her out of her dress and into a nightgown with maternal efficiency. Rest now, the older woman said gently, tucking the quilt around Willa. Everything else can wait. Willa fell asleep, almost instantly, her last thought of whiskey-colored eyes and a promise of tomorrow. She woke in the late afternoon, disoriented until memory came flooding back. For a moment, she just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling and processing everything that had happened. Then she rose, washed her face in the basin on her dresser, and dressed in a simple day dress. Her reflection in the small mirror showed shadows under her eyes and a paleness to her skin, but there was also something new there, a spark of something that might have been hope. Mrs. Holloway insisted she eat something, so Willa joined her in the small kitchen behind the seamstress shop and picked at a bowl of stew while the older woman worked on a dress alteration. The comfortable rhythm of her needle and the peaceful silence helped settle Willa's nerves. That Shane Adler is a good man, Mrs. Holloway said suddenly, not looking up from her work. His family owns the Anchor Ranch, one of the largest spreads in this part of the territory. They came out from Texas about 10 years ago and built that ranch up from nothing. Shane is the youngest son, but by all accounts, he works as hard as any of his brothers. Never causes trouble in town, always respectful. He would be a fine catch for any woman. Willa felt her cheeks warming again. We are just getting to know each other. Mm-hmm, Mrs. Holloway said, a knowing smile playing at her lips. Just getting to know each other. Well, you could do far worse, dear. Far worse indeed. The rest of the day passed quietly. A few people stopped by the shop, ostensibly to pick up mending or place orders, but really to satisfy their curiosity about Willa's situation. Mrs. Holloway ran interference beautifully, confirming that yes, Willa had been falsely accused, yes, the real thief had been caught, and no, there would be no further gossip tolerated in her establishment. Thank you very much. By evening, Willa felt confident that the truth was spreading through Snowflake as rapidly as the false accusation had. That night, she lay in bed and allowed herself to think about Shane Adler. She pictured his face, the way he had looked at her with such certainty when he said he knew she was not a thief. She thought about the fact that he had ridden through the night to Holbrook, following a hunch that might have led nowhere, all to clear the name of a woman he had never even formally met. What kind of man did something like that? A good man, she decided. The kind of man who kept his word, who stood up for what was right even when it was difficult. The kind of man worth knowing better. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright. Willa dressed with extra care, choosing her best dress, a blue cotton with white trim that Mrs. Holloway had helped her make last spring. She pinned her dark hair up carefully, allowing a few tendrils to curl around her face. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. There was color in her cheeks and a brightness in her eyes that had been absent for too long. Shane arrived at precisely 10 o'clock, dressed in clothes that were clearly his Sunday best: dark trousers, a clean white shirt, and a vest that looked new. He had obviously taken time to bathe and shave, and his hair was still slightly damp. He held his hat in his hands and smiled when he saw her. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and the genuine admiration in his voice made Willa's heart flutter. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself," she replied, accepting his offered arm. The walk to church took only a few minutes, but it felt like running a gauntlet. Every person they passed stared openly, and Willa could practically hear the gossip, starting before they were even out of earshot. She held her head high, refusing to show how much the attention bothered her. Shane seemed to sense her discomfort. "Let them stare," he said quietly. "They will find something else to talk about soon enough. Besides, I am proud to be walking with you." His words steadied her, and by the time they reached the small white church at the edge of town, Willa felt calmer. The interior was simple but well maintained, with wooden pews and windows that let in the morning light. They found seats near the back, and Willa was acutely aware of the whispers that followed them. Reverend Thompson, an elderly man with a voice that somehow carried despite his frail appearance, began the service with a reading about forgiveness and jumping to judgment. Willa wondered if he had chosen the passage deliberately, given the week's events. Throughout the sermon, she found it hard to concentrate. She was too conscious of Shane sitting beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. When they stood to sing hymns, his deep voice blended with her lighter one, creating a harmony that felt right in a way she could not quite explain. After the service, several people approached to offer awkward apologies for believing the accusations against her. Willa accepted them with grace, though inside she felt a lingering bitterness. How quickly they had been ready to believe the worst of her, and how quickly they now wanted to pretend they had never doubted. But she knew that holding on to anger would only hurt her in the end, so she smiled and forgave and tried to mean it. Shane had prepared a picnic basket, which he retrieved from his horse tied outside the church. "I thought we could ride out to Silver Creek," he suggested. "There is a nice spot under some cottonwood trees where it is cool and peaceful." Willa agreed, and Shane helped her mount his horse before swinging up behind her. Sitting in front of him, enclosed by his arms as he held the reins, felt both thrilling and terrifying. She could feel the solid wall of his chest against her back, could smell the clean scent of soap and leather that seemed to cling to him. The ride to Silver Creek took about 20 minutes, following a dusty trail that wound through scrub brush and occasional stands of juniper. The landscape around Snowflake was beautiful in its own harsh way, wide open spaces under an impossibly blue sky, with distant mountains creating a dramatic backdrop. Willa had grown to love this land in her 3 years here, so different from the green hills of Missouri, but possessing its own stark beauty. Shane was right about the spot by the creek. Several large cottonwood trees provided dappled shade, and the water burbled over smooth stones with a musical sound. The temperature was at least 10 degrees cooler here than in town, and Willa sighed with relief as Shane helped her down from the horse. He spread a blanket on a flat area near the water and began unpacking the basket. To Willa's surprise, the food was quite good: fried chicken, fresh bread, cheese, apples, and even a small jar of pickles. There was also a bottle of lemonade, still cool from being stored in a cellar. "Did you make all this yourself?" Willa asked, impressed despite herself. Shane looked slightly embarrassed. "I cannot take full credit. Our ranch cook, Charlie, helped with the chicken, but I baked the bread myself. My mother insisted all her sons learn basic cooking skills. She said she did not want any of us starving just because we could not find a woman willing to put up with us." Willa laughed, the sound surprising her. It felt good to laugh, to feel something other than fear and stress. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Shane said softly. "She passed away 2 years ago. Pneumonia. We all still miss her something fierce." "I am sorry," Willa said, reaching out impulsively to touch his hand. "I lost my parents 3 years ago to influenza. That is why I came out here. There was nothing left for me in Missouri." Shane turned his hand over, gently grasping hers. His palm was warm and calloused, his grip careful but firm. "That must have been hard coming all this way alone." "It was," Willa admitted. "But I wanted a fresh start, a chance to make something of myself. The position at the trading post was a miracle. Most places would not even consider hiring a woman for that kind of work. Mr. Harrington took a chance on me, which makes what happened even more difficult. He trusted me, and then he so quickly believed I had betrayed that trust. He knows better now," Shane said, "and I think he genuinely regrets doubting you. Not that it excuses what he did, but people make mistakes when they are frightened or angry." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, passing food back and forth and enjoying the peaceful sound of the creek. Willa found herself relaxing more than she had in days, maybe months. There was something about Shane that put her at ease, despite the butterflies in her stomach whenever their eyes met. Tell me about the ranch, she said after a while. What is it like working with cattle? Shane leaned back on his elbows, his long legs stretched out in front of him. It is hard work, harder than most people realize. You are up before dawn and working until after dark during busy seasons. The cattle do not care if it is raining, or if you are sick, or if you have other things you would rather be doing. They need tending every day. But there is something satisfying about it too. Building something with your hands, watching the herd grow, knowing you are creating something that will last. How many brothers do you have? Willa asked, curious to know more about his family. Three. I am the youngest. Samuel is the oldest. He is 32 and runs most of the day-to-day operations now that our father is getting older. Then there is Scott, who is 28, and Simon, who is 26. I am 24, just turned last month. He paused, seeming to remember something. They are going to want to meet you, fair warning. Especially Samuel. He takes his role as head of the family very seriously since Mother passed. The casual assumption that she would meet his family, that whatever was developing between them would continue, made Willa's heart skip. And your father? What is he like? Stern but fair. He built the Anchor Ranch from nothing, saved every penny to buy the land, and then worked himself nearly to death getting it established. He has strong opinions about most things, but he respects hard work and honesty above everything else. I think he would like you. Sean sat up again, turning to face her more fully. But enough about my family. Tell me about you. What do you dream about, Willa Kinsley? What do you want from life? No one had ever asked her that before. Willa found herself having to really think about the answer. I suppose I want what most people want: security, respect, a place where I belong. After my parents died, I felt so adrift. I had no roots, no family, no home. Coming to Snowflake and building a life here, establishing myself as someone trustworthy and capable, that meant everything to me. When I was accused of theft, it felt like all of that was being ripped away. But it was not, Shane said firmly. You are still all of those things. One false accusation does not change who you are. Maybe not, but it changed how people see me, Willa said. Even though the truth came out, there will always be some who wonder, who think that maybe I did do it and just got away with it somehow. That is the thing about accusations, they leave stains even after you are cleared. Shane was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he said, My family brand is an anchor. Do you know why my father chose that symbol? Willa shook her head. He said that in life you need an anchor to keep you steady when storms come. Something solid that holds you in place so you do not drift away. People with strong character, people who know who they are deep down, they have that anchor inside them. You have that, Willa. I can see it. Whatever anyone else thinks or says, you know who you are and what you are made of. Hold on to that. Willa felt tears prickling at her eyes, but they were good tears this time. How are you so wise for 24? She asked, her voice wavering slightly. Shane grinned, the expression transforming his face and making him look boyish. I am not wise at all. I just know how to sound good when I am trying to impress a pretty girl. Willa laughed again, and the tension broke. They spent the rest of the afternoon by the creek, talking about everything and nothing. Shane told her stories about growing up on the ranch, about the time he broke his arm trying to ride a wild bronco when he was 15, about the massive cattle drive they had done last year to get their herd to market in Flagstaff. Willa told him about her childhood in Missouri, about her father's small dry goods store, and how she had learned bookkeeping by helping him with his accounts. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Shane reluctantly started packing up the remains of their picnic. I should get you back to town before dark, he said. People talk enough already without adding fuel to the fire. Willa knew he was right, but she found herself disappointed that the day was ending. She had not felt this relaxed, this happy, in longer than she could remember. The ride back to Snowflake seemed too short, even though it took the same 20 minutes as the ride out. When they reached the seamstress shop, Shane helped her down from the horse, his hands on her waist lingering a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Soon?" "I would like that," Willa said. "Though I suppose I should find out if I still have a job at the trading post first." "Even if you do not, something else will work out," Shane said with certainty. "But I think Mr. Harrington would be a fool to let you go, and whatever his other faults, he is not a fool." Shane was right. The next morning, Willa received a message from Mr. Harrington asking her to come to the trading post to discuss her future there. She dressed carefully and walked to the store, her stomach churning with anxiety. When she arrived, she found Mr. Harrington waiting in his office, looking like he had aged a decade in the past few days. "Miss Kinsley," he said, standing when she entered, "please sit down." Willa perched on the edge of the chair across from his desk, her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. She met his eyes steadily, refusing to show weakness. "I owe you an apology that goes far beyond anything I said the other day," Mr. Harrington began. "I accused you of a terrible crime without any real evidence beyond circumstance. I let my panic and anger override my judgment, and I nearly destroyed the reputation of the most valuable employee I have ever had. There is no excuse for my behavior." "You are protecting your business," Willa said, the words feeling mechanical. She had forgiven him in theory, but actually sitting here looking at the man who had so quickly believed the worst of her brought all the hurt rushing back. "That is no excuse," Mr. Harrington said firmly. "You deserved my trust and I failed to give it to you. My son is facing justice for what he did, as he should. But I want to make things right with you as well, as much as I can. I am prepared to give you a 20% increase in wages, effective immediately. I am also naming you assistant manager of the trading post, which comes with additional responsibilities, but also additional pay and authority. And I am giving you a formal letter of character reference that you can use should you ever decide to seek employment elsewhere, which I sincerely hope you will not." Willa had not expected such a generous offer. The increased wages alone would allow her to save money, to perhaps think about her future in ways she had not dared before. "That is very generous, Mr. Harrington. It is only what you deserve. I also want you to know that I have spoken to everyone I can think of in town, making it clear that you are completely innocent and that anyone who continues to suggest otherwise will no longer be welcome to do business at my establishment. For whatever it is worth, I am trying to repair the damage I caused." "I appreciate that," Willa said, and found that she meant it. Anger was exhausting, and holding on to it would only make her miserable. "I accept your offer. I will return to work tomorrow." The relief on Mr. Harrington's face was palpable. "Thank you, Miss Kinsley. You do not know what that means to me." As Willa left the trading post, she felt lighter than she had in days. She had her job back, her reputation was being restored, and she had Shane Adler's interest to warm her thoughts. Life was beginning to look bright again. Over the next few weeks, Shane courted her with a single-minded determination that was both flattering and slightly overwhelming. He came to town twice a week instead of his usual once, always finding excuses to visit the trading post when she was working. He brought her small gifts, wildflowers picked on his ride into town, a pretty stone he found by the creek, a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy. They went on picnics, took long walks, and spent hours just talking about their dreams and hopes for the future. Willa found herself falling for him with a speed that would have frightened her if it had not felt so right. Shane was everything she had never known she wanted in a man, strong but gentle, confident but not arrogant, hard-working but able to laugh at himself. He treated her as an equal, respecting her opinions and intelligence in a way that few men did. And the way he looked at her, like she was something precious and wonderful, made her feel beautiful in a way she never had before. One evening in late September, Shane asked if she would like to visit the Anchor Ranch. "I want you to meet my family," he said. "They have been pestering me for weeks about the woman who has been taking up so much of my time and attention." Willa agreed, though the prospect made her nervous. Meeting his family felt like a significant step, an acknowledgement that whatever was between them was becoming serious. But she wanted to take that step, wanted to know more about the world Shane came from. The ride to the Anchor Ranch took about 2 hours, following a well-maintained road that wound through increasingly rugged terrain. As they crested a final rise, Willa got her first view of Shane's home, and it took her breath away. The ranch house was larger than she had expected, a sprawling adobe structure with a wide porch and corrals spreading out behind it. In the distance, she could see cattle grazing on golden grassland, hundreds of them from what she could tell. Several smaller buildings dotted the property bunkhouses for the ranch hands, a barn, storage sheds, and other structures she could not identify. "It is beautiful," she said honestly, and Shane's face lit up with pride. "My father built all of this with his own 2 hands, him and my brothers. Every building, every fence. We are all pretty proud of it." As they rode into the yard, several people emerged from the house. Willa recognized the family resemblance immediately, all tall men with similar builds and facial features, though each had their own distinctive characteristics. The oldest, Samuel, had more gray at his temples and carried himself with an air of authority. Scott was leaner, with laugh lines around his eyes. Simon had darker hair and a more serious expression. The man who must be Shane's father stood slightly apart, ramrod straight despite his years, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His weathered face was stern, but Willa thought she detected kindness in the lines around his mouth. "Father, brothers, this is Willa Kinsley," Shane said, helping her down from the horse with obvious care. "Willa, my family, my father, Silas Adler, and my brothers, Samuel, Scott, and Simon." "Miss Kinsley," Silas Adler said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "My son has talked about little else but you for weeks. I was beginning to think he had invented you." "I assure you I am quite real," Willa said, finding her courage. Something told her that showing weakness in front of this man would be a mistake. "It is a pleasure to meet you all. Shane has told me so much about the ranch and your family." "All good, I hope," Samuel said, stepping forward to shake her hand. His grip was firm but careful, and his eyes assessed her with obvious curiosity. "My brother does not usually bring women home to meet the family. You must be special. Or I must be desperate to introduce a civilizing influence to you barbarians," Shane said dryly, and his brothers laughed. The tension broken, they all trooped into the house. The interior was comfortable rather than fancy, with furniture that showed the wear of hard use but was well maintained. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, and Willa could see through a doorway into a kitchen where someone was working. "That is Charlie, our cook," Shane explained. "He has been with us since the beginning. Used to be a trail cook on cattle drives before his knees gave out. Now he feeds us and keeps us in line." A weathered man in his 60s emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on an apron. He had the bow-legged walk of someone who had spent most of his life on horseback. "So you are the young lady who has got our Shane all twisted up," he said, looking Willa up and down. "Well, you are prettier than the last one, I will give you that." "Charlie," Shane said warningly, but Willa just laughed. "There was a last one?" she asked innocently. "A rancher's daughter from over Holbrook way," Samuel volunteered, clearly enjoying his younger brother's discomfort. Shane courted her for about 3 months before she decided ranch life was not for her. Ran off and married a banker from Phoenix. "Ancient history," Shane said firmly, "and not nearly as interesting as what is for dinner. Is that pot roast I smell?" Dinner was a boisterous affair, with conversation flowing freely and good-natured teasing flying in all directions. Willa found herself relaxing despite her initial nervousness. Shane's family was rough around the edges, but fundamentally good people, she could tell. They worked hard, valued loyalty, and clearly cared deeply for each other. Silas Adler waited until after the meal was finished and they had moved to the porch to enjoy the cool evening air before he addressed Willa directly. My son tells me you work at the trading post in Snowflake, that you handle the books and manage the inventory. Yes, sir, Willa said. I have been there for 3 years now. Mr. Harrington recently promoted me to assistant manager. So you are good with numbers and organization, Silas said thoughtfully. Those are valuable skills. This ranch generates a fair amount of paperwork, bills of sale, breeding records, expense accounts. Samuel handles most of it now, but he would rather be working with the cattle than sitting at a desk. We could use someone with your skills if you were ever interested. Willa felt her eyes widen. Was he offering her a job? She glanced at Shane, who looked surprised but pleased. I appreciate that, Mr. Adler, though I am happy at the trading post for now. The offer stands, should circumstances change, Silas said. He fixed her with his piercing gaze. I can see why my son is taken with you, Miss Kinsley. You have spine and you are not afraid of hard work. Those are qualities I respect. Coming from this taciturn man, it felt like high praise. Thank you, sir. As the evening wore on and stars emerged in the vast sky above the ranch, Shane and Willa took a walk away from the house. They followed a path that led to a small rise overlooking the property. From here, they could see the lights of the ranch house and the darker shapes of the buildings and corrals. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Your family is wonderful, Willa said softly. I can see why you are so proud of them in this place. They liked you, Shane said. I could tell. My father does not offer jobs to just anyone, and Samuel actually smiled at you, which is a minor miracle. He has been grumpy ever since his wife left him last year. He was married? Willa asked, surprised. She had not heard anything about this. For 2 years. But she hated ranch life, hated the isolation and the hard work. One day, she just packed up and left, went back east to her family. Samuel does not talk about it, but it hurt him bad, made him suspicious of women who are not born to this life. And yet he seemed to accept me easily enough, Willa observed. Because you are different, Shane said simply. You came to the Arizona territory alone, built a life for yourself through sheer determination. You did not run away when things got hard, when you were accused of theft. You stood tall and faced it. That is the kind of strength it takes to survive out here. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, looking up at the stars. There were thousands of them, maybe millions, scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. In the cities back east, Willa had heard, you could barely see the stars because of all the lights and smoke. But here they blazed with impossible brightness. Willa, Shane said suddenly, his voice serious, I need to tell you something. I know we have only been courting for a few weeks, but I have to be honest with you. I am falling in love with you. Actually, I think I have been falling since that first day I saw you in the trading post, being patient with an old prospector who could barely count out his coins. But now that I know you, really know you, it has gone beyond attraction or admiration. I am in love with you, and I need you to know that. Willa's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She turned to face him fully, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. In the starlight, his face was shadowed, but she could see the intensity in his eyes, the vulnerability of someone laying their heart open. I am falling in love with you too, she whispered. It scares me how fast it is happening, how much I feel. But I cannot deny it. When I am with you, I feel like I have finally found the home I have been searching for. Shane reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses on his palms. Can I kiss you? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. Yes, Willa breathed, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss started gentle, almost tentative, as if Shane was afraid she might pull away. But when Willa leaned into him, wrapping her arms around his neck, he deepened the kiss, pulling her closer against him. Willa had been kissed before, those awkward, fumbling encounters in her youth, but this was different. This was fire and tenderness combined, passion tempered with respect. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. I want to marry you, Shane said, resting his forehead against hers. I know it is too soon to ask properly, but I need you to know that is where my heart is heading. I want to build a life with you, Willa. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to introduce you as my wife and watch you bloom in this land we both love. Tears were streaming down Willa's face now, but they were happy tears. I want that too, she said. I want it so much it terrifies me. Then let me do this right, Shane said. Let me court you properly for a few more months, give you time to be absolutely sure this is what you want. And then if you still feel the same way, I will ask you to marry me in front of God and everyone, and we will build the life we both dream about. A few more months, Willa agreed, though part of her wanted to throw caution to the wind and marry him tomorrow. But Shane was right. They should do this properly, give themselves time to be certain, even though in her heart she already knew she would never feel differently about him. The next few months passed in a blur of happiness. Willa continued working at the trading post, but now she had Shane's courtship to look forward to, his regular visits that brightened even the most mundane days. They went on rides through the beautiful Arizona countryside, attended town dances where Shane held her close, and they moved together like they had been dancing together for years, spent quiet evenings on Mrs. Holloway's porch talking about their hopes for the future. Shane introduced her to all his friends, and Willa found herself being accepted into a community of ranchers and their families. She attended church socials and ladies' aid meetings, building connections that had been difficult when she was just the woman who worked at the trading post. Shane's obvious devotion to her seemed to open doors that had previously been closed. In December, Shane took her back to the Anchor Ranch for a Christmas celebration. The house was decorated with pine boughs and handmade ornaments, and Charlie had outdone himself with a feast that included roasted turkey, fresh bread, 3 kinds of pie, and more side dishes than Willa could count. Shane's family welcomed her like she was already one of them, and Silas Adler even smiled when he gave her a beautifully tooled leather journal as a gift. For keeping records, he said gruffly. I noticed you like to write things down. Figure you might appreciate having something nice to write in. Willa was touched beyond words. The journal was clearly expensive, and the fact that Shane's stern father had noticed her habits and chosen such a thoughtful gift meant the world to her. As the evening wound down and most of the family had retired to bed, Shane led Willa outside once more. Snow had fallen earlier that day, unusual for Snowflake but not unheard of, and the world was transformed into a wonderland of white under the light of a full moon. Their breath puffed in clouds in the cold air. I have something for you, Shane said, his hand going to his pocket. When he pulled it out, he was holding a small velvet box. Willa's breath caught in her throat. I know I said I would wait a few more months, Shane said, dropping to one knee in the snow. But I cannot wait any longer. I love you, Willa Kinsley. I love your strength and your kindness, your intelligence and your laugh. I love how you light up when you talk about something you are passionate about, and how you always see the best in people, even when they do not deserve it. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy, building a home with you, raising a family with you. Will you marry me? He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the moonlight and sparkled like a captured star. It was not ostentatious or fancy, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. Yes, Willa said, tears streaming down her face again. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Shane stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that made her forget about the cold, forget about everything except the feeling of his lips on hers and his arms around her. When they finally pulled apart, they were both laughing and crying at the same time. I was so nervous, Shane admitted. I thought there was a chance you might say you needed more time. I have known for months, Willa said. I was just waiting for you to ask. They went back inside to share the news with Shane's family, who were somehow not at all surprised. Finally worked up the courage, did you? Samuel said, clapping his younger brother on the shoulder. About time. I was beginning to think I would have to lock you two in a room together until you figured things out. They decided on a spring wedding, giving them time to plan, but not so long that the wait would be unbearable. Willa gave notice at the trading post, though Mr. Harrington tried to convince her to stay on at least part-time. She considered it, but ultimately decided she wanted to dedicate herself fully to ranch life and to helping build the Anchor Ranch into something even more successful than it already was. The months between their engagement and the wedding flew by. There were preparations to make, a dress to sew, invitations to send to Shane's relatives scattered across Texas and New Mexico. Mrs. Holloway threw herself into helping with the wedding plans, treating Willa like the daughter she had never had. Shane's family was equally involved, with Charlie insisting he would prepare the wedding feast and refusing to hear any arguments. The wedding took place on a beautiful April day in 1884, with the desert beginning to bloom with wildflowers and the weather perfect warm but not hot, with a light breeze that kept everyone comfortable. The ceremony was held at the church in Snowflake, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Willa wore a dress of white satin that Mrs. Holloway had labored over for weeks, with delicate lace trim and pearl buttons down the back. She carried wildflowers that Shane had picked himself that morning. Shane stood at the altar in a new suit, his hair neatly combed and his face shining with happiness. When Willa walked down the aisle, she saw his eyes fill with tears and her own vision blurred in response. There was no one to give her away. She had no family, but she walked with her head high, knowing that she was choosing this path of her own free will, going to meet the man who had proven his worth in every way that mattered. Reverend Thompson performed the ceremony with obvious pleasure, his voice ringing out clearly as he spoke about love and commitment, about partnership and faith. When it came time for the vows, Willa and Shane spoke clearly and firmly, their eyes locked on each other as they promised to love and cherish through all the days of their lives. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Thompson said finally. "Shane, you may kiss your bride." And Shane did, thoroughly enough that Samuel had to clear his throat loudly before they finally broke apart, both laughing. The reception was held at the Anchor Ranch, with tables set up outside under a clear blue sky. Charlie had indeed prepared a feast, and there was music and dancing that lasted well into the night. Willa danced with Shane, with his father, with each of his brothers, and with what felt like half the men in the county. But her favorite dance was the last one, when the other guests had started to drift away and she and Shane swayed together under the stars, alone in their happiness. "Mrs. Adler," Shane whispered in her ear, and Willa shivered with pleasure at hearing her new name. "How does it feel?" "Perfect," Willa said honestly. "Everything feels absolutely perfect." They spent their wedding night in the main ranch house, in the room that had been prepared for them with obvious care. Someone had placed fresh flowers on the dresser and turned down the bed with clean sheets. Shane carried Willa over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition, and then set her down gently. What followed was sweet and tender, two people learning each other in the most intimate way possible. Shane was patient and gentle, making sure Willa felt comfortable and cherished. And when they finally came together, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, the physical expression of the love they had declared with words and promises. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the darkness, Willa's head on Shane's chest and his arms around her. Through the window, she could see stars and hear the distant sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. "Are you happy?" Shane asked softly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Willa said truthfully. "When I came to Arizona 3 years ago, I was so lost. I had no family, no real purpose beyond just surviving. Now I have you. I have a home. I have a future full of possibilities. You gave me all of that, Shane." "No," Shane said firmly. "You created that for yourself through your own strength and determination. I just had the good sense to recognize what an amazing woman you are. You saved yourself, Willa. I just get to be lucky enough to spend my life beside you." Willa felt tears pricking at her eyes again, but they were happy tears. She tilted her head up to kiss him, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. Shane responded with equal passion, and they lost themselves in each other once more. The first year of their marriage was an adjustment. Willa had to learn the rhythms of ranch life, which were very different from working in a trading post. She rose before dawn to help Charlie with breakfast for the family and ranch hands. She learned to keep accounts for the ranch, tracking expenses and income with the same meticulous attention to detail she had brought to her work at the trading post. She helped with medical care for injured animals, mended clothes, put up preserves from the garden Charlie maintained behind the house. It was hard work, harder than anything she had done before. But it was also deeply satisfying. She was building something real and lasting, contributing to a family legacy that would continue long after she was gone. And she was doing it alongside the man she loved, which made even the most difficult days bearable. Shane was an attentive and loving husband. He never took her for granted, always made time for her despite the demanding work of running a ranch. They would steal moments throughout the day, a kiss in the barn, holding hands while walking out to check on cattle, quiet conversations in the evening after everyone else had gone to bed. And their nights together were filled with passion that seemed to grow stronger rather than fading as the newness wore off. In the fall of their first year of marriage, Willa realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but wanted to be certain before telling Shane. When she finally shared the news, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy, then immediately set her down and asked if he had hurt her or the baby with his exuberance. "We are fine," Willa assured him, laughing at his concern. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am not made of glass." But Shane treated her like she was made of something precious nonetheless. He fussed over her constantly, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work. His brothers teased him mercilessly about it, but Willa secretly loved the attention, the tangible proof of how much he cared. The pregnancy progressed normally, though Willa experienced morning sickness that lasted well into her second trimester. Charlie, who apparently had helped deliver more than one calf and foal in his time, took it upon himself to prepare special teas and bland foods that helped settle her stomach. Silas Adler, in his gruff way, made sure she had a comfortable chair in every room and forbid her from climbing ladders or lifting anything heavy. In late May of 1885, Willa went into labor. The local midwife, Mrs. Chin, the same woman who had sent Willa food when she was in jail all those months ago, came to attend the birth. Shane paced outside the bedroom like a caged animal, his brothers trying unsuccessfully to distract him with whiskey and conversation. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours. There were moments when Willa thought she could not possibly continue, when the pain was so intense she wanted to give up. But Mrs. Chen's calm presence and whispered encouragements kept her going, and the knowledge that Shane was just outside the door, willing her to be strong, gave her the determination to push through. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, their son was born. He came into the world howling with impressive lung power, his face red and his tiny fists waving. Willa held him to her chest, overwhelmed with love so powerful it took her breath away. This tiny person, this perfect little boy, was hers, and Shane's created from their love. "It is a boy," Mrs. Chen called out, opening the door. A healthy boy with a good, strong cry. Shane burst into the room, his face pale and his eyes wild. But when he saw Willa holding their son, his expression transformed into something so full of love and wonder that Willa started crying all over again. He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the baby with awe. "He is perfect," Shane whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Willa. Thank you for this gift." They named him Samuel Josiah Adler, after Shane's oldest brother and Willa's late father. Samuel the elder pretended to be grumpy about having a namesake, but Willa saw how his eyes got suspiciously wet when he first held his nephew. Silas Adler declared the boy had good, strong bones and would make an excellent rancher someday, which was apparently the highest compliment he could pay. The first few months with baby Samuel were exhausting, but wonderful. Willa had never experienced such profound tiredness, but she also had never known such complete fulfillment. Watching Shane with their son, seeing this rough cowboy become impossibly gentle as he cradled the baby or sang off-key lullabies in the middle of the night made her fall even more deeply in love with him. They settled into a routine as a family of three. Willa learned to accomplish tasks with a baby on her hip or sleeping in a basket nearby. Shane adjusted his work schedule so he could spend more time at the house, wanting to be involved in every aspect of his son's development. The whole family rallied around them, with Shane's brothers competing to be the favorite uncle and Charlie slipping Willa extra treats to keep her strength up while nursing. When Samuel was 6 months old, Willa was surprised to discover she was pregnant again. Irish twins, Mrs. Holloway said with a laugh when Willa visited her in town and shared the news. You will have your hands full, my dear. Shane's reaction was again one of pure joy, though this time tempered with concern about Willa managing two small children. We will figure it out together, Willa assured him. Families all over the territory have multiple children close in age. We will be fine. Their daughter was born in April of 1886, an easier labor than her brother's had been. She came into the world more quietly than Samuel had, looking around with serious dark eyes that reminded Willa of Shane's father. They named her Rose Marie, after Shane's mother and Willa's mother. Now they were a family of four, with two children under 2 years old. The house was chaotic, filled with the sounds of babies crying and laughing, with diapers to wash and mouths to feed, and never quite enough sleep. But it was also filled with love, so much love that sometimes Willa felt like her heart could not possibly contain it all. Shane proved to be a wonderful father, patient and playful with both children. He would come in from a long day of work and immediately scoop up Samuel and Rose, spinning them around until they shrieked with laughter. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with crying babies in the middle of the night, and told elaborate stories that the children were too young to fully understand, but seemed to enjoy anyway. The years passed quickly, marked by the milestones of their growing children. Samuel took his first steps, then spoke his first words. Rose followed close behind, determined not to be outdone by her brother. They grew from babies into toddlers, from toddlers into children, each with their own distinct personalities. Samuel was serious and thoughtful, fascinated by the workings of the ranch and constantly following his father and uncles around. Rose was more adventurous and mischievous, always getting into things she should not and charming her way out of trouble with a smile. Willa and Shane settled into their roles as parents and partners, their love deepening with each passing year. They had disagreements occasionally, as any couple did, but they always worked through them with communication and compromise. The foundation of trust and respect they had built in those early days of courtship proved strong enough to weather any storm. In 1889, when Samuel was 4 and Rose was 3, Willa gave birth to twins, two boys they named Thomas and Theodore. The household became even more chaotic, but somehow they managed. Shane's brothers, who had all remained unmarried, threw themselves into the role of uncles with enthusiasm. Even Silas Adler, now growing elderly, could often be found with a grandchild on his knee, telling stories about the old days when they first came to Arizona. The Anchor Ranch continued to prosper under the family's careful management. Shane took on more responsibility as his father aged, working closely with Samuel the Elder to make decisions about breeding stock, land management, and expansion. Willa's skill with numbers proved invaluable. She kept detailed records that helped them identify which areas of the operation were most profitable and where they could improve efficiency. But beyond the practical aspects of ranch life, Willa had found something she had not even known. She was searching for a true home. Not just a place to live, but a place where she belonged, where she was valued not just for what she could do, but for who she was. A place where she was surrounded by family, by people who loved her, and whom she loved in return. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Shane took Willa back to the spot by Silver Creek where they had shared their first picnic. The children were left in the capable hands of Charlie and Shane's brothers, giving them a rare day alone together. They spread a blanket under the cottonwood trees, now fuller and more mature than they had been a decade ago, and unpacked a simple lunch. Do you ever regret it? Shane asked suddenly. Giving up your independence, the life you had built in town, to become a rancher's wife? Willa looked at him in surprise. Not for a single moment. Why would you even ask that? Shane shrugged, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Sometimes I worry that you gave up too much, that I asked too much of you. You had your own career, your own money, your own life. Now you spend your days keeping house and chasing after 4 children. Willa reached over and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. Shane Adler, you listen to me. The life I had before was fine, but it was also lonely. I was making my way in the world, yes, but I was doing it alone, always wondering if there was something more. You did not take anything from me, you gave me everything. You gave me love, family, purpose, a home. I would not trade a single moment of our life together, not even the hard moments, for all the independence in the world. Even those first few months after the twins were born, when you were so exhausted you could barely stand, Shane asked, a hint of humor entering his voice. Even then, Willa confirmed, laughing. Though I will admit there were moments when I wondered if we would all survive the experience. But we did. And now those baby days are behind us, and we have 4 beautiful, healthy children who are growing up strong and happy. We did that together, Shane. We built this life together. Shane pulled her close, kissing her with the same passion he had shown on their wedding day. I love you, Willa Adler. I have loved you from the moment I saw you patiently helping that old prospector count his coins. I loved you when I watched you stand tall in that jail cell, refusing to break under the weight of false accusations. I loved you when you walked down the aisle toward me in that beautiful dress. I loved you when you brought our children into the world. And I will love you every day for the rest of our lives. That is a good thing, Willa said, wiping away happy tears, because you are stuck with me now. For better or worse. Remember? It has all been better, Shane said firmly. Every single day with you has been better than the day before. They spent the afternoon by the creek, talking and laughing and remembering the journey that had brought them to this point. They talked about the early days when Shane had ridden through the night to clear her name. They remembered their courtship, the nervous excitement of falling in love. They reminisced about their wedding, about the births of their children, about the 1,000 small moments that had woven their lives together into something beautiful and lasting. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they packed up their picnic and prepared to ride back to the ranch, back to their children, their family, their life, back to the home they had built together through hard work and love and unwavering commitment to each other. Thank you, Willa said, as Shane helped her onto the horse. For what? He asked, swinging up behind her. For believing in me when no one else did. For seeing who I really was when everyone else saw only what they wanted to see. For giving me a chance to prove myself. For loving me. Thank you for letting me, Shane said simply, and they rode home together as the first stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. The years continued to roll by, bringing both joys and challenges. Silas Adler passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1892, leaving the ranch entirely in the hands of his sons. Shane and his brothers mourned their father, but honored his memory by continuing to build the legacy he had started. The Anchor Ranch expanded, adding more acreage and increasing their herd size until they were one of the most successful operations in northeastern Arizona. The children grew into young people with their own dreams and ambitions. Samuel, true to his serious nature, declared his intention to take over the ranch someday. Rose shocked everyone by announcing she wanted to become a teacher, a noble profession that would require her to attend normal school. The twins, now teenagers, were still trying to figure out their paths, but showed promise in everything they attempted. Through it all, Willa and Shane remained partners in the truest sense. They made decisions together, supported each other through difficult times, and never lost the spark of romance that had brought them together in the first place. Shane still brought Willa wildflowers he picked on his rides around the ranch. Willa still made sure to brush her hair and wear something pretty when she knew he would be coming in from work. They still stole kisses in the barn and held hands when they walked together under the stars. In 1898, on a beautiful summer evening, the entire family gathered for a celebration. It was Samuel and Rose's joint birthday. He was turning 13 and she was turning 12, and Willa had prepared a special meal. The house was full of noise and laughter as children chased each other around, as Shane's brothers told exaggerated stories from their cowboy days, as Charlie grumbled about everyone getting underfoot in his kitchen, but secretly loved the chaos. After dinner, as the adults sat on the porch watching the children play in the yard, Samuel the elder raised his glass. "A toast," he said, his voice carrying over the conversation. "To family, to the legacy our father built, and to the woman who has been the heart of this ranch for 15 years now. To Willa, who came to us under difficult circumstances but has proven herself 1,000 times over. None of us would be here, happy and prosperous, without your strength and wisdom. Thank you for everything you have brought to this family." Everyone raised their glasses, echoing the toast. Willa felt tears pricking at her eyes, overwhelmed by the love and acceptance these people had shown her. She had come to Arizona as a stranger, accused of a crime she did not commit, with no family and no prospects. Now she sat surrounded by people who loved her, in a home she had helped build, living a life richer than anything she could have imagined. Shane squeezed her hand under the table, and she turned to meet his eyes. In them, she saw everything she needed to know: love, pride, commitment, and the promise of all the years still to come. They had built something beautiful together, something that would last long after they were gone. Their children would carry on the legacy, and their children's children after that. As the stars came out and the children were finally rounded up and sent to bed, Willa and Shane remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms. The night air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of sage and pine. Somewhere in the distance, a nightbird called, and closer, she could hear the gentle sounds of the cattle settling down for the night. "No regrets?" Shane asked, as he had so many times over the years. "Not a single one," Willa answered, as she always did. "This life, this family, it is everything I ever wanted, even before I knew to want it. You saved me, Shane, in more ways than one." "We saved each other," Shane corrected gently. "That day in the jail, I was drifting through life without purpose or direction. Watching you face that false accusation with such courage, it woke something up in me. It made me realize that life is too short to waste, that when you find something worth fighting for, you fight with everything you have. You gave me purpose, Willa. You gave me a reason to be the best man I could be." They sat together in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other in the midst of hardship and built a love that had stood the test of time. Behind them, the ranch house glowed with warm light, filled with the family they had created together. Before them stretched the land they had worked and nurtured, beautiful and harsh and theirs. Above them, stars scattered across the sky like promises kept. Willa leaned her head against Shane's shoulder, feeling completely at peace. The scared young woman who had stood in that jail cell 15 years ago, wondering if her life was over, would never have believed she could end up here with so much happiness and love. But she had learned that life had a way of surprising you, that sometimes the darkest moments were just preludes to the brightest dawns. Shane had said he knew she was not a thief, even when everyone else had doubted. He had believed in her when belief was the only thing she had. And from that belief, from that one person standing up for her, had come everything else: love, family, home, purpose. It was proof that one person, one moment of courage, one decision to stand for what was right, could change everything. As they finally rose and headed inside for the night, walking hand in hand through the home they had built together, Willa sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. For second chances, for love that conquered doubt, for a cowboy who had seen the truth when no one else would look, for this life, imperfect and challenging, but absolutely perfect in all the ways that mattered. The door closed behind them, and the ranch settled into peaceful silence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, new moments to cherish. But for tonight, all was well. The stars shone down on the Anchor Ranch, on the family sleeping safe inside, on two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of accusation and doubt. Their story had started with false accusations and a jail cell, but it had become so much more a testament to the power of faith, the strength of love, and the truth that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. Willa and Shane had proven that a person's character cannot be destroyed by lies, that true love sees past circumstances to the heart beneath, and that together, two people can overcome anything. And in the end, that was all that mattered. They had found each other, they had built a life together, and they would face whatever the future held side by side with love and faith and the unshakable certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be. The false accusations that had once threatened to destroy Willa had instead led her to her true home, to the man who would love her through all the days of her life, and to a happiness deeper and more complete than she had ever dared to dream possible. The Wild West could be harsh and unforgiving, a place where justice was sometimes hard to find and accusations could destroy lives. But it could also be a place of second chances, of new beginnings, of love that grew strong under the Arizona sun. Willa and Shane had found all of that and more, and they would carry it with them through all the years to come, a shining example of what two people could build when they chose to believe in each other against all odds.